I'm so excited to be doing this video today. It is just past the summer solstice and I thought it was the perfect day, bright, sunny, beautiful, warm but not too hot, to do a tour of my balcony garden. Now, I did one of these last year and I actually got comments on it throughout the year after I filmed it and uploaded it to YouTube, because a lot of people said that it really helped them when they were planning out their own balcony garden this year. So I thought I would continue to do this tradition of sharing what my balcony garden looks like. I certainly spend a lot of time on it and have been gardening in containers and raised beds on my balcony for several years, so I have some experience to share. One thing to note is that I'm located in a fairly cold climate. I'm located in Canada and my zone is 5B, if you're familiar with the North American zones. Basically, I can plant out flowers in May and then everything will grow pretty well in June and July. And then by August it starts to slow down because the days end up getting really short, and then by September things are usually wrapping up for the season. So if that gives you some idea of what kind of climate I'm in, hopefully that helps. The other thing to note is everything grows really fast right now, right around the summer solstice, but things will slow down and I'll start to harvest some of the fruits and vegetables I'm about to show you in August, and things are kind of done after August, September. Well, I still tend to have a lot of flowers in September, but everything gets a little less productive by then. I really love gardening because, for one thing, it gives me a great excuse to be outside when the days are warm and sunny, and it's just a great way to spend your time outdoors. I also love it because I enjoy painting, and so it's really fun to be able to pick flowers and just paint some of the plants that I'm growing. And I also love this because I actually grew up in a really rural environment, and so I grew up around trees and plants and flowers, and to me that was just kind of normal. But when I moved to a more urban area, I had all of that taken away from me. The first place I ever lived in a city had no balcony and no outdoor space. So now, years and years later, of course, I make sure that I always am living in a place with a balcony or some kind of outdoor space. So I'm going to show you both spaces, the front and the back, in today's tour. I'm also going to show you this part of the back, which is much more planted out, and then off to the side, over on the other side of the balcony, I really just have tomato plants, and I'm going to do a separate video on tomato plants because that's a whole other story, is how to grow a tomato on a balcony. Yeah, I hope this gives you some ideas. So hey, let's go. Let's take a look. Okay, coming out from my kitchen, actually, this is how my balcony looks. This is my view, and yes, I do have clothes hanging up there because I love to air dry my clothes. So starting out, I have to show you this petunia plant. These are called wild violet petunias, I believe. These are from Baker Creek Seeds. I actually started this plant in my arrow garden in, I believe, February or March. It's just one plant and it's grown up tall like that. I put it in a little ceramic pot and it's just amazing. It loves the environment back here. Over here is the table I was just sitting at. Now, I like to float flowers in a little dish of water. I think that's just such a pretty way to display the colorful flowers that I'm growing. I have my mini container garden on the table. Most of these plants are plants that come indoors during the winter. This one lives in a south-facing window all winter. These are violas. These I just grew from seed. They're called rose antique violas, I believe. This is some white sage. Now, white sage does not like this environment, unfortunately. I tried to grow it because I know it's endangered in California, and this came from a nursery. I believe it was in Alberta. And I know it's endangered in California, so I was hoping to maybe grow my own white sage to make sage bundles. But it just, no matter what I do to it, it doesn't love this climate. It actually lived over winter under a really bright grow light. I transitioned it outside this spring, and it always looks like this. I don't know what to do for it. So anyway, it's alive, that's all I can say. These are some scented geraniums. I love scented geraniums. If you watched my video last year, you might remember me saying that. This one I actually grew from seed last summer. I love their scented foliage. They just always smell so wonderful. Occasionally they flower. These two aren't in bloom right now, but I have one that is. They do tend to get leggy, so I'm learning to prune them. In fact, these could have been pruned a little bit more. And once you prune them, it's actually very easy to propagate new plants from cuttings. Over here, I have a golden raspberry plant. Now, this is amazing because it is 4 years old. It actually survives our incredibly harsh winters, which get down to -40 Celsius and Fahrenheit, same temperature. It survives in this terracotta pot planter all winter. And so, yeah, I love it. The best part is these raspberries are absolutely delicious. They're not quite ripe yet. They will be ripe in July, but certainly it looks like I'm going to have quite a few this year. It's always very productive. So down here, I actually have a banana plant. Now, I just bought this. I have no idea how well it will do. Supposedly you can take it inside in the winter, which would be my plan. Bananas are not common in Canada, so I have no idea how it's going to do. I do like it for its tropical leaves. I think it's really just fun to have. Now, I love roses. And roses do grow in containers, and I believe in a lot of places where you can live, you could keep them in containers year-round and have no problems. But unfortunately, last winter we actually had a really mild winter, but I had 2 potted roses and neither one survived. So I got this one rose to kind of replace it and try something different. This is a mini rose. It's called a fairy rose. And it's not supposed to get too big. It is, as you can tell, blooming profusely right now. Unfortunately, they don't smell like anything, but they're really pretty hardy down to zone 3. So if I'm zone 5, usually when you plant a plant in a container, you want to plant something at least 2 zones below the one you live in, so that, you know, would fit the bill. But my other roses that died last winter were also zone 3, so I don't know. I haven't figured out the secret to growing roses in a container and overwintering them successfully in such a harsh climate. Back here, I have a 20-gallon smart pot, and in the past I've tried to grow vegetables in here, but honestly I find that the flowers just do the best in these. I haven't been in love with the smart pots for growing things like, I know some people try squash and so forth. I haven't had a lot of success. The only thing I've had success growing in a smart pot in terms of vegetables is actually corn. Over here is a new purchase this year, which is a green stalk. So this is the 3-level green stalk. I think by default their usual model comes with 5 levels. I thought the 5 level would be way too imposing on my balcony, and I think I was right, because this is already a very substantial piece on my balcony, but I love it. It's absolutely overflowing. I only planted 1 plant per pocket, and it's filled in so much, and the plants are just absolutely giant. So I mainly planted mint, strawberries. So I have a couple of kinds of mint actually. I have orange mint, I have Moroccan mint, and I have a spearmint on top. I also planted strawberries. These are ever-bearing strawberries, so they're going to continue to produce strawberries all summer long. They tend to produce most in June, and then again like kind of August, September. And then I have few flowers. I have a calendula, I have a nasturtium somewhere, it hasn't started blossoming yet, and a few violas and pansies that I also started from seed. Now, if you're familiar with greenstock, this is the area where you put water to water the entire unit. I did, for space reasons, put a few smaller pots in here, so when I water the greenstock, I do have to lift them out, fill this basin with water, water the greenstock, and then put them back in. But on a balcony, I think it's worth it because then I just get that extra space for a few more containers. In these little pots, I have this is a laurel tree, or a bay leaf tree. That I overwintered indoors under a bright grow light, and it's done very well, going back and forth between the indoors and outdoors. And then, oh yeah, and a chamomile just kind of sprung up. I didn't intentionally plant a chamomile plant in there, but it arrived. I also have a pot of spearmint, that's what that is. And then I have this dragon wing begonia, which I also overwintered actually. This does really well as a houseplant in winter. All right, over here I have what is called a veg trug. This is a raised planter that I bought a few years ago. I like it, but I find it's best for growing things like lettuce, kale. Well, that's what I have in there right now. Lettuce, kale. I'm trying a hot pepper, a habanero pepper, I believe that is. I had some peas in here, but they just stopped producing, so I actually just took them out yesterday. So the peas do all right, but in past years I've tried to grow tomatoes and bigger vegetables in here. Even though it has a very deep, kind of towards the back, it's deep and there's more soil, I just find that vegetables don't do super well. I should say big vegetables like tomatoes. And you'll see some plastic netting. Now, normally I like to avoid plastic in my garden, but we have a huge squirrel population this year, and they were just tearing up this entire garden every day in the spring, basically. We also have issues with raccoons. So yeah, thanks to our local squirrels and raccoons, I had to put up that plastic netting, and it has deterred them. They've gone on to easier targets. So that's a big chamomile plant over there. I've got these wild strawberries. This is all kale. It seems to be very heat tolerant, which is great because most leafy greens I can't grow this time of year. It's just too hot. This particular lettuce I have also seems to be fairly heat tolerant. And then got my habanero pepper in there. I actually just popped in some sunflower seeds back there, hoping that maybe a dwarf sunflower will grow this year. So next up is the bottom of the U shape of our balcony, which you can see down here. So in this first container, it's just a galvanized steel container. Last year I used it as a water garden, which was okay, but only mildly successful. So this year I filled it with dirt and put some flowers in it. Right now I have some blue sweet peas blossoming, and then what else should be coming up should be bachelor buttons, and I think I have some snapdragons, but those will have to wait till July and August. This plastic container I also have some flowers in. By the way, I prefer plastic containers for flowers just because I don't think all plastic containers are food safe, so I tend to throw flowers in there. This was an old container. I have a beautiful calendula coming up, and then this little shelf is what I call my plant nursery. So sometimes plants that are struggling or dying go back here because it's actually, I don't know, I find that a lot of plants get revived here. So I had some miniature fig trees that needed to be revived. After a winter indoors, they didn't enjoy the transition back outside. I also have a scented geranium cutting, a dying coffee plant. I have some live ones indoors. My Christmas cactuses, which you'll see down below, I put those outside every single year in the summer They go into a dormant period when it's warm like this, but then once it cools down in October, that sort of springs them back to life, and in October I move them back to the indoors. Okay, behind me is what I like to call the tomato balcony because it's mainly tomatoes, and as I said, I'm going to do another video on growing tomatoes in containers on a balcony, so stay tuned for that. So I'll just briefly give you a quick little overview of what those are. These tomatoes get morning, afternoon, and evening sun. Don't ask me how that works, I'm not sure. But anyway, I have a couple of different kinds of tomatoes. So I've got some cherry tomatoes. I believe this is a Sweet 100, for example. Sun Gold. This is a black one that's called Midnight Snack, which is, I don't know, sounded interesting to me. I have Sunrise Bumblebee. I have Dr. Witchy, which is the only tomato I planted from a seed this year that actually survived. That is another story for another time. And this is called a pineapple tomato. In the corner, I actually have a hydrangea bush growing. I'll see if it blooms this year. It's supposed to bloom in the fall. And then I have a nasturtium with it and a pansy and a few little blue sweet peas as well. Another scented geranium. These I overwinter indoors under grow lights. And as always, a nice basket of flowers. Even though it's in the sun right now, it gets shade most of the day, so these are shade plants. More violas, a New Guinea impatient, and a coleus. This is another plant that survives all year in a container. It's actually wormwood, as in absinthe wormwood. It's actually a great plant for cleaning. So I covered my back balcony. We've seen all of that. Now I'm about to step out front into the front balcony and I can show you what I'm growing there. I used to actually probably grow double the amount of plants up there other years, but for one thing, we decided we wanted more space to sit out there and actually enjoy it. And another thing is that a tree was cut down by the city in our front yard early last year. And unfortunately, that has made the balcony incredibly, incredibly hot. And even the most heat-loving flowers kind of hate it out there. So it's been a challenge to grow very heat-tolerant plants. So I'll show you what I have though. Welcome to my front balcony, and it's noisy, so I don't know if I'll keep the audio or do a voiceover later, but anyway, it's an urban environment, what can I say? There's noise, it's a part of the gardening experience here. First of all, I have this massive, extremely comfortable chair. This chair I just got off of Amazon because I actually broke another chair that I had. And I had no idea it would be this big, and at first I thought it was too big and a terrible choice, but then I sat down and realized it was extremely comfortable, so I've been very happy with it. Alright, next to this chair, you will see a couple things. So this is a cedar planter, and I just put flowers in here this year. The flowers that do the best in containers are, well, I won't say they necessarily do the best, but my preferred flowers for a container up here are actually wildflowers. And this goes back to I grew up in a really rural environment, and I miss the sort of wildflower look of nature living in the city. And so I don't, buy greenhouse geraniums and things like that that you usually see planted in planters. I've actually tried to grow more wildflower type seeds. So the ones that work the best for me are the white is baby's breath. This is a Cleome. This is some yarrow. This is yellow yarrow. I established it, I think, 2 years ago. I also have some pink yarrow that just came up for the first time this year, so I'm really happy about that because I think the yellow and the pink, the two different shades of pink, are super pretty together. This hot pink flower is one of my favorite flowers to grow in a container. I'm so happy it loves it up here. It's actually a phlox and it smells so good, and it's a perennial. These, I believe, are bachelor buttons, so again, those will come up later. Although I'm not positive. They don't look like bachelor buttons to me. I'm not entirely sure what those are. Some years I just have plants that I don't know what they are, and they surprise me later. I do have a lavender plant. You can see it peeking up through here. It sort of survived the winter. I mulched it and protected it the best I could. I would say only certain branches survived the winter. It was a big bushy lavender, and just a few branches ended up surviving, so the other wildflowers kind of grew up around it. It was a little scraggly earlier this spring. Now on the other side of the cedar container, I have a massive currant plant. This is a red currant, which I think is actually really beautiful. It didn't produce any flowers or fruit this year, but it should next year, as long as it continues to survive the winter up here in a container, which no one told me it could. I'm just trying it. It's grown a lot this year. It's probably tripled or quadrupled in size. I love it because it's big and bushy and just kind of wild looking. Underneath it, I had some lunaria growing and a few shade-loving plants, but they've just been blocked out of the sun. I do have some sweetgrass growing throughout my garden. There's a bit in that corner, and that I will cut towards the end of the summer and make into a smudge bundle. Got a little hanging petunia right there. This I've shown on several videos, and by the way, behind it is the neighbor's balcony. Not being used. So much growing potential not being used. This is my jasmine plant, and I've had this for several years as well. And I've got 3 little flowers coming. They tend to come out at night. And I overwinter this indoors, again, under a grow light. It does okay. I say that tentatively because this year it seems to not be as full or lush or as blooming as profusely as normal. And I think what I may need to do is actually change its soil or give it a bigger pot, which I'm not sure when to do that, if I should do it now or later in the summer. I think when you're overwintering plants in containers for too many years, they do need to have completely fresh soil. So on one side of my raised bed here, I have just a little table and a few more pots. I have a sage plant that you can see in the middle there. There's a bit of thyme next to it. I have a bougainvillea. I can never pronounce it correctly. That I overwintered in a south-facing window, and it survived the winter. I was shocked because a lot of people told me it would not survive our long winters indoors, but it did. And then this is one of my favorite plants because I love how it smells. It's lemon verbena. I have tried to overwinter this almost every year because it's my favorite plant. It hates being moved indoors, so I just can't figure it out. And it absolutely will not survive our harsh winters here. So I have to keep buying a new plant every year from a local grower, but luckily they're relatively easy to find. On the other side of the container next to the door, so right here I actually have a lemon tree. This is a Meyer lemon tree. I can't decide whether to keep it indoors or outdoors. It kind of seems like it hates both places. Today it's outside. Other days it's inside. I'm not sure where to keep it, and I really love it. I've always wanted a lemon tree. I just bought it a few weeks ago, so I really want it to be happy, and it was blossoming. Blossoms have fallen off. I don't know, I'm gonna buy it a nice bright light for the winter and hope it survives. And then behind it, over here, I have another pot of morning glories, and those will grow up this low trellis. I also have a few sweet peas, and that one looks like it's going to be a red one, which is different than what I've had before. These prefer the shade, but I think when they're crowded with other plants, they seem to do okay for me. So I just stick sweet peas in whenever I can with other flowers. Okay, so the other direction is the very hot and dry part of the balcony garden. All right, on the table I have a little planter with some lantana, which is supposed to attract butterflies and pollinators. I have a geranium that, believe it or not, I overwintered this and it was super happy inside, so you never know. And by the way, I normally I don't bother to overwinter geraniums. I usually grow them as annuals, but this one was such a pretty color that I tried keeping it last fall and it loved being inside. This is an agave plant, which it just came outside for the summer. Along the wall, it is super hot, but I have my famous passion fruit vine, which I've shown in videos before, and so I cut it back before bringing it out this summer. It takes a while to acclimatize, but it finally got used to being out here and it seems to love the hot brick wall. Down here I have a pot of marshmallow. Now this is, yes, the plant marshmallow. You can actually make marshmallows out of them. You actually make marshmallows out of the root, and you can use the root for medicinal purposes. But I also really like the flowers. And the tricky part of this is it loves to have its feet wet, hence the marsh part of marshmallow. But it also seems to really enjoy a warm afternoon sun, so I find it does the best up here, surprisingly. And next to the marshmallow is a new plant for me this year. This is actually a goji berry. It has already grown since I planted it out in this little container. I read that it likes conditions like tomatoes, so I put it in a terracotta pot and I'm trying it out. It's supposed to have fruit in the fall. I don't know if it'll do it, if it will fruit its first year, but we'll see. And then once again, this will be going inside under a plant light for the winter. And over here I have a little patchouli plant. Now this patchouli plant has done extremely well other summers, but it didn't seem to love transitioning outside after the winter this year, and I'm not sure what I did wrong. It's okay, but normally it does way better than this. Now I did trim it a while back, and I managed to successfully root some of the cuttings, so I actually have another patchouli plant indoors that's growing as a house plant right now. I don't dare put it outside because I don't want it to end up like this one. And this down here in the corner is just another viola, which is actually a really beautiful pattern. All right, finally in the direct hot sun, as you can see, I have another raised bed. This is the Veg Trug herb bed. I've had it for several years. I have some sage plants, and the sage plants did semi-okay. I have a lot of trouble growing sage here. So the fact that these are alive, I consider they're doing a good job. Kind of inspired by the sage, I decided to put Mediterranean herbs. So I added this rosemary plant. The yarrow grows here, it comes back every year. Yarrow loves my environment, what can I say? I have a couple of lavender plants. This one's not blossoming. This is called a fern leaf lavender, but it doesn't have a lot of scent. Then I have a Spanish lavender, which is also not blossoming. Lavender is very disappointing. It's my favorite flower, and yet just doesn't do well here. I have some dill that actually came up from seeds last year that had self-seeded. This is a Greek basil, which I love. Back here, I'm trying some medicinal kind of plants. This one is a hyssop. So that seems to be doing okay, actually. It's grown a bit since I planted it. Alright, thanks for watching my balcony container garden tour. I will try to do another one of these later this summer because I would love to share how everything looks and how it all turned out once we're into late August, September, that kind of time frame. So stay tuned for that. If you have any questions for me, let me know. Just comment down below. And if you have any suggestions, recommendations of other plants I should try growing in containers, also let me know. Alright, take care.